Democratic candidate Joe Biden is inching closer to victory in the U.S. presidential election as President Donald Trump has turned to court to try to challenge the results. Biden is leading Trump in the key states of Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, and Pennsylvania, while the president is ahead in Alaska and North Carolina. Race is particularly tight in Georgia, where Biden's lead over Trump is in the hundreds now. Biden has so far secured 264 out of the 270 electoral votes that he needs to become president, while Trump has obtained 214. The Trump campaign has filed several lawsuits now with states to try to complain about voting irregularities and calling for a halt to the ballot count. Biden and his supporters, however, say every vote must be counted. In Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, people gathered just outside a ballot counting center celebrating in anticipation of a Biden victory. A similar rally was also held outside the White House in Maricopa County, Arizona, though state where Biden still holds the lead. Armed Trump supporters protested the results outside an election center. They reiterated Trump's allegation that Democrats are trying to rig this vote. Joining us now for this news review is Netfa Freeman, coordinating committee member for the Black Alliance for Peace out of Washington, D.C., and Margaret Kimberley, editor from Black Agenda Report, joining us from New York. Hello, and I'd like to welcome you both to the program. I guess we'll start there in New York with you, Margaret. Good to see you again back here on Press TV. Your thoughts on a lot of this unprecedented stuff, both with this late result that we're still anticipating to see and the kind of rhetoric we're seeing out of the White House.
Well, it's not surprising. What is surprising is the fact that it's taken, this is now the third day of counting votes, but that's an indication of the huge turnout that was created, frankly, by Donald Trump and by the desire to get this man out of office so that many of those who sat out in 2016 were moved to get to the polls in 2020. But it's interesting, Biden appears to be headed to victory. It's much more difficult for Donald Trump to get there. And that is why he is calling these lawsuits, which I believe will be futile. We're going to have a Biden presidency, but that brings with it some challenges because there's a large number of voters who just want to get rid of Trump, who have not really asked much of Biden. And he is in a position, frankly, to create huge problems in this country and around the world.
Thank you, Margaret. And Netfa, I'd like to welcome you to the program here. Now, Netfa, to Mrs. Kimberley's point, right now we're at 141 million people that have showed up and vote or did so by mail. And they're saying possibly when all the counting is said and done, it could be up over 150 million, which would be a record since the year 1900. That's 120 years. Do you agree with Kimberley, Ms. Kimberley, as to, why possibly, in your point of view, are we seeing these record turnouts for this election?
Yeah, I agree with what Margaret Kimberley has said. Margaret. And actually to extend the latter point, is that there's a lot of problems with this because people have been mobilized to dislike Trump, and he's very easily dislikable. But at the same time, because we're not asking for anything, there's some serious problems that the country has that will not be addressed by a Democratic presidential candidate, particularly Joe Biden. For example, the economic extreme crisis that this country is in, that's been exacerbated because of the pandemic. There is the issue of police, really rampant police brutality and extrajudicial killings that Joe Biden has promised that he wants to increase funding for the police and support the police. And so there's really no difference there. And then there's the threat of war that we don't really hear a lot about, and the media has done a good job of, if not being in line with the march to war, they definitely don't report on it. and so particularly with against Russia and China. And so these are the things that I think the public could be very well blindsided by, and that a lot of hopes have been put into the election. In fact, the uprisings that we saw right after the murder of George Floyd, they have kind of been misdirected, which is how they use the electoral process a lot in this country, to misdirect the radical expressions and energies of the populace, particularly of people, non-white people, working class non-white people in this country. And so, yes, I agree with the analysis, and I wanted to think that we should add on to that perspective.
And Ms. Kimberley, why is it, and it's funny that Netfa should say that, because I've heard that from so many people where they've said that it really doesn't matter who wins this election. What we've seen over the last few years just shows what a really bad spot America is today spiritually. Can you please elaborate on that? Is that a concern of yours, how divided and polarized, and especially with a lot of the rhetoric we've seen, a lot of the divisions we've seen, and it seems like we don't really see a foreseeable bridge to try to bring people back together?
Well, I don't think that's necessarily a concern. It's not of mine. I think that it's more of a platitude than anything else. We have a country where people don't get what they need and what they want. Joe Biden's job is to give people what they want. Millions more people came out to him because they wanted to do away with Trump's policies. His job is to bring about the policies that people need. Now, this is difficult because the Democrats' donor class don't want them to do what people need. They don't want to have a national health insurance program. They don't want to have a higher minimum wage. They don't want to have a government spending to make people whole after this economic crisis from the COVID pandemic. But Biden, people need to remember, they need to tell Biden what they want him to do. Then you will have a healed country, because you will have the will of the people being met. And that's what's lacking. Americans too often are told that they cannot get what they want, that we have to settle for neoliberalism, we have to settle for imperialism, and that we dare not have any higher expectation.
And speaking of expectations, Netfa, what are yours for the next U.S. president in the next 4 years, and what he could do to make America better?
What he could do? Well, I mean, I think Margaret spelled it out, what he could do in terms of what I expect. I think there was that was also there. They're committed to more neoliberalism, austerity, and war. And so what he could do is not on the agenda. In fact, I think he made it clear to the donor class that he says nothing is going to change, that he's not about to adopt an agenda that would change anything fundamentally here. And so we can expect that. I think one of the things, though, because of neoliberalism and imperialism being an unsustainable thing, the conditions of the people will intensify. The adverse conditions of the people will intensify. So we're going to see more uprisings, and we're going to see also repression, Democratic Party style. So instead of the very brass and crass declarations that a president like Trump might make, they will have to resort to very similar methods of quelling the dissent, but at the same time speaking another way, using the media in a way that attempts to confuse the people of what the issues are at stake and what's at hand. That's what we can expect. And what the Democratic Party can do, or what any of the presidency could do, really should be to implement a universal health care plan, something that guarantees some financial sustenance and security for people, living wages and those kind of things. In fact, even better control over the enterprises that people have to labor under, for more worker control. But these are things that the Democratic Party and who their donor class wants to see. So we won't really be able to see that much from them. So we expect a different angle of repression and oppression.
And that's not a lot of optimism that we're hearing from either of you. Ms. Kimberley, your final thoughts on this. We have about a minute left. Go ahead, ma'am.
I am going to echo what Netfa said. People in this country have to make demands. Joe Biden will do as little as he can get away with, and anything people want to see, they are going to have to mobilize en masse in order to get it. And that is the only route to some semblance of justice in this country.
All right, you two, I want to thank you both for showing up on the program and joining us with your respective perspectives on this election. I'd like both of you to stay safe until we speak to both of you again. Netfa Freeman from Washington, D.C., and Ms. Margaret Kimberley there joining us out of New York. And viewers, that's a wrap for this segment of your Press TV's News Review. Thank you for tuning in, and goodbye for now.